Hey guys, we are live. We got everything working. Sorry about the delays for a couple minutes. We had some technical difficulties on my end. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there's already an animated beginning to this to explain why all the technical difficulties are my fault. So, uh, just going around the round table a little bit. Brandon, you might see me in the other shows that are on this channel. I'm here with my friends Bryce right below me. We got over to that side, we got Tim. And then Ryan and Jess are, I'm going to mess this up. They're in the other corner opposite of me because I don't know directions. Uh, so this is a D&D podcast, and we have a few things that we're going to just chit-chat about for episode 1 and kind of hash out what the show's going to be about. Feel free to comment if you're watching this on YouTube below or talk live on Twitch. It's an interactive podcast, so we'll just kind of talk and answer questions as they come up. Do we want to go around and kind of introduce ourselves? We'll start Bryce below me. What's up?
All right, my name's Bryce. You probably won't have seen me online. This is probably the first time. I've been playing D&D for over a decade with the same DM, and I've been playing role-playing games in general for a very long time.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's good to have you, Bryce. There, Tim. Do you want to introduce yourself? Like, what got you on D&D and like what you do with the hobby?
Complaining kind of way. I've been around since second edition that I've been playing, so it's been quite a while. I was in my early teens when the second edition was really starting to become popular. All the way up to fifth. Bryce and I have been playing for about the last decade. Fourth edition, I think, is when he came in. So
My match is
let's
going to
see.
go 20 more days.
I was back with THACO, so it's a while back, but it's fun. There's been a lot of changes to it, and it's an amazing experience, as we're going to talk about.
For those who don't know, what is THACO?
Sorry, it's to hit armor class 0. So where we now use a D20 system and you just add your bonuses and modifiers to hit, you actually had a chart back in D&D. It was a lot of charts, and you had to check your roll against what was on the chart. So it was a very interesting. Some people thought it was too much information.
So we're getting Tim on a little bit of dial-up internet there, but he'll be back in a second. While we're wrapping that up, Ryan, Jess, you want to give yourself a little shout out, introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Ryan. This is my wife, Jess. We've been playing for a few years. I started off with, I can't remember the name of the system now. One of those cities of heroes or something in the late 90s, and just ended up hating life with the group I was with. But ever since I picked up D&D, it's always been a great group. And my wife, Jess, here, I'll let her introduce herself. And
Hi everybody, I'm Jess. I'm probably the newest one to all of it. I've only played 5e. I think I've been playing, 2 years now with this group.
yeah,
So, yeah, we have a lot of fun. Good. And then some trouble. Make our DM a little crazy, but,
Cool.
hence the drink.
So we have like a big circle of different experience levels, some playing for most of their lives and some just starting out, which is a good cross section of the whole player base. And we're kind of coming together and making this podcast, video segments and such, due to the whole not being able to play in person anymore for, I don't know, some short amount of time in the foreseeable future. But we noticed that like even the game that we like and we come to play together in Dungeons and Dragons has to evolve with the way that society is evolving. Um, so to kind of touch on like the beginning and ways to play like online, or how would you guys play, or how do we play in this whole stay 6 feet away and like can't touch or sneeze or like uh, so like Bryce, how are you playing and getting your Dungeons and Dragons fix now?
Well, funnily enough, my first experience with tabletop role playing games was back when I was in late middle school. Um, I actually played Vampire the Masquerade over a conference call. So this is not really too far apart from that, except for now we have video. I did host a one shot on Roll20. Roll20 is a great platform for playing online, but you don't really need it, especially if you use Theater of the Mind. But I find it is helpful. It's easy, it's free. I mean, you can pay for things to get books and stuff like that on there, but you don't need to. I've also heard things about Tabletop Simulator, and I've not checked into them. And that's available on Steam, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. So, are you doing anything currently to play or during the social distancing situation? Like, are you playing? You had a Roll20 game go
I
on
did.
last week. Did it go well? Like, did everyone seem to be okay with that?
As it went as well as it could go. Technical difficulties on the startup, not ever having DM'd over a computer program before. Some technical difficulties with the players getting into the game. And some people had to drop out as we went along, but it was just a one shot. You weren't the only one, Tim. It was just a one shot. That was the one shot was actually provided by um, Dungeon in a Box.
Okay.
So they do have some stuff for one shots that are pretty good.
A question did come in before we circle around to the other guys. Bryce, what is Theater of the Mind? You had mentioned that, and some people in chat don't know.
So Theater of the Mind, instead of having a bunch of maps and miniatures, the DM just describes what's happening, and you have to roll with it. And we will touch on that again shortly. After everybody's gone around, we can discuss Theater of the Mind versus miniatures and maps and what's in between.
Cool. Ryan and Jess, how about you guys? How are you getting your Dungeons and Dragons fix, your tabletop stuff in, even when we're on complete lockdown?
Well, we were part of the game last weekend that Bryce put on over Roll20. Overall, I'd say it was a pretty good game. We did have a couple of learning curve issues with Roll20. We were trying to use the dice roller built in, and none of us have. I've kind of played around with it a bit, and without building your character sheet into Roll20, it's a whole lot harder to use their dice roller program. I really enjoyed it overall. I like the maps and the fog of war on the maps that they have set up and everything for when the DM takes the time to set that stuff up like Bryce did. The mapping system on Roll20 is really good. Overall, I think that's the only way we've played so far. I know one of our other members had mentioned to me that he had played a game over, I think, Google Classroom, he said. And I was kind of curious how that went.
Okay. Yeah, I've never used or even heard of Google Classroom. Have either of you guys ever heard or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a teacher, so we use Google Classroom quite often. But actually, I was using Google Meeting, and let's see, and I've done Discord, 2 different games. One with my son and one of his friends that they both signed on, and that was through meetings. And so we had only 3 people on at the time. We had a fourth, but they kept dropping out. And that went very well. We did work with Theater of the Mind, but one of the things that Bryce had shown when he was doing his, I believe was it Roll20 you said that you were doing?
Yes.
Was the pop-up of images that you could add onto it to the screen to give the ambiance, or if you wanted to explain something to the players. So that came in really handy, but Google Classroom itself allows you to integrate a lot of different software into what you're doing. So you could roll videos, you can add in images, you could pull up active roles or so forth. So if you have multiple tabs open on your computer, you could actually just go to that tab and show what's in it.
Wow. I mean, it seems pretty streamlined, pretty straightforward for that kind of theater of the mind play.
Well, it's made for education, Google Classroom. So they have to be able to have a lot of different formats they can work with. Like I said, fortunately, since I'm in the education system, I have access to it. But it has its downfalls, just like any of the other online systems do, and just like even General Play does. You know, you're only limited to, if you use a grid map or if you use miniatures, you kind of lose that creativity. But if you go with Theater of the Mind, sometimes you have this epic image in your head. You want to see it played out, but then somebody else is like, oh, well, there's a wall over there, but you couldn't see it because it was Theater of the Mind.
And that's actually a good point. And maybe we go off the rails a little bit from the script, but the whole theater of the mind versus the Roll20 like mapping system or something that's very concrete. There is the pluses and minuses, like you said. And how do you deal with then in a theater of the mind situation where a player or multiple players are thinking one thing, they're thinking this giant, massive combat's happening, but the DM is like, oh well, there's actually walls there, like, and then you have that disconnect where someone who was really into the moment is now like, oh, it's not happening the way I think it's happening. Like, is there a good way, have you guys found, to curb that, to get that back into those like the pull in moments that you really get your players to like enjoy being their characters in the moment? And when you do hit those disconnects, how do you resolve them with your groups?
Well, Bryce, one thing he always adds in is the rule of cool. So if I had not described a wall or the surroundings well enough, and somebody's like, I come swinging in and doing this, it wasn't explained, so we'll go with it as it is. Sometimes if it's really critical, like you're in a cave and you've already given it a brief description, roll with it. I mean, it is a role-playing game. See what you could do. Maybe you could describe how they're sort of raked against the top of the cavern or the tunnel they were in, which limits them, but they still got to do it. And one of the things that one of the YouTubers that I've heard who talked about built-in failure, but failure doesn't mean death. So you don't have to lose that dramatic, I'm going to lob off its head, but you could change it somewhat so they still get the gratification, but then you're adding in the realism that you wanted in the first place. If you're just always, no, that's not going to happen and so forth, you're going to lose your group pretty soon, at least in my opinion. I know both Ryan and Bryce, when they have DM'd, they will allow a lot of things to go on that we'll just ask. And I think the more you play, especially in the theater of mind, the more things you're saying, like, how dark is it? How bright is it? Are there any boxes around? Where can I hide? What do I see? So being as descriptive as you can helps, but that's where the advantage of having the map comes in. In the same regards, if you want something really spectacular on the map, you either have to draw it in yourself, find a tile you can add on to it, or go with what's on the map.